Doom 64 might be the most divisive Doom game ever made, of course next to Doom 3. Instead of being just a port of the original Doom but for the Nintendo 64, Doom 64 was an entirely new beast. The game has over 30 newly designed levels, and it even gives the player an exclusive weapon that hasn't shown up until Doom Eternal, the Unmakyr. id Software took on a more supervisory role, and it was Midway who actually developed the game. Doom 64 is like if you take Doom 1 and 2 and turn them into something that Tim Burton would make. The game's presentation is very gothic, the enemies are redesigned to be more scary, and Doom 64 also features a lot of fluorescent lighting. While the monsters can be challenging to the player, especially in later levels, the real enemy in Doom 64 is the new environmental dangers and scripting that the game adds. Doom has had crushing ceilings and things like that before, but Doom 64 ramps this up, and the level of environment interaction feels like a character in of itself. Regardless, Doom 64 was released in 1997, and it's an interesting game for sure. I know that many fans either fucking adore Doom 64, or find it too dark and too atmospheric to get into. I personally like the game for what it is, a different take on the classic Doom formula. When I think of Doom 64, I usually consider the game as a perfect middle ground from classic Doom to Doom 3. I mean, you have the typical run and gun gameplay of classic Doom, but Doom 64 also features dark interiors and spooky lighting, which sounds very similar to Doom 3. For many years, Doom 64 was like the TurboGrafx 16 of the Doom franchise. While Doom 1 and 2 got all the spotlight and attention, Doom 64 was chilling in the background, and nowadays, most people seem to have come around to it. In fact, this game has been rejuvenated by Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, probably due to the game's creative director, Hugo Martin, being a huge fan of Doom 64. Doom Eternal has the Unmakyr, and Doom 64's re-release was even a pre-order bonus, and when you finish the Doom 64 Lost levels, there is a reference to Doom 2016 within the end screen text. With that said, I want to discuss the gameplay of Doom 64 and how it can be compared to Doom 1 and 2, as well as how Doom 64 has been revisited by Nightdive and the new id Software team. This is the lasting impact of Doom 64. The first level in Doom 64 sums up everything about the game. There's an emphasis on colourful lighting, and that's immediately clear when you look at these blue cages. Doom 64 is a lot darker and focuses on environmental gameplay elements, and that's also seen throughout the first map. The named staging area is pretty perfect in this case, and it's a wonderful level to start out the game with. Other aspects of Doom 64 to note so far include the Pinky Demons appearing to be a lot more threatening compared to Doom 1 and 2, the chainsaw has 2 blades on it, and there is more of a puzzle element this time around. Key collecting is huge in Doom 64, and in the second level, all 3 keys need to be grabbed in order to progress. Before we move on to map 2, let's talk about the weapons some more. As you can see, both of the shotguns don't have the full animation to them, and they just have this little pump when they reload. This doesn't bother me, and apart from that quirk, both shotguns are awesome in Doom 64. They make a great sound, and that goes for most of the other weapons in the game. The chain gun is fucking sick, and has a blue flame effect when firing. The rocket launcher is basically the same as Doom on PC, but has an updated look and sound. The plasma rifle has a cool light that emits from it when shot, and the BFG is just the big fucking gun. Enough said. We'll get to talking about the Unmakyr later on, because getting that weapon is a bit more of an involved process. Map 2, the Terraformer, is the make or break level for Doom 64. This is where you're either locked in for the ride, or you get frustrated and turn the game off. In the level, you're greeted by this pitch black hallway, with the only bit of navigational help being from these red squares. The player will eventually find their way to the switch where the blue lights are turned on, and I personally love this aspect about Doom 64. The way that you need to activate the light sources is very creative. Speaking of cool gameplay moments, there's a part in map 2 where you are able to grab the chain gun, but then a bunch of pinkies come after you. If you just keep firing, you'll kill them all soon enough, but it might seem pretty intimidating for first time players. So you're progressing along the level, and then you get up to this part with the collapsing ceiling blocks. This specific section is where you might get frustrated, and yeah, getting crushed is annoying, but as you can see, they tell you where to stand, and it's not that hard the second time around. Also, how can I discuss map 2 without mentioning the disappearing blue key puzzle that they pull off? This is great, and it feels like the developers are fucking with you, which to me is the most memorable aspect about Doom 64. The experimental puzzle design and the more creative environmental dangers / tricks is why Doom 64 stands out among the rest of the classic Doom series. This is exemplified with the part in map 2 where the pillars repeatedly smash the ground, opening up a new path to explore through. Doom 64 reminds me of Duke Nukem 3D in this regard, with the environmental set pieces. Map 3 gives us a better look at the Nightmare Imp, a more powerful variant on the classic imp that we all know. He shoots purple fireballs, and they kinda have the same graphical properties as the Spectre. They're both translucent, and they're a nice addition, I guess. The third map also introduces the Cacodemon, which looks fucking badass with the chains around his arms, the glowing yellow eyeball, and his darker aesthetic. He acts more or less the same as the Cacodemon on PC, but he just has more of a gothic appearance. The same goes for the Lost Soul, who again is introduced in map 3. The next level, titled Holding Area, shows more of the UAC facility, and it's pretty good. Map 4 leads to the first secret level, with the super secret level being accessible in map 1, and I don't have much to say on Hectic other than it's a pain in the arse. At least it has that cool third person zoom out shot of Doomguy getting blown up, which has never been done before in a Doom game up to that point. Anyway, the first secret level, Outpost Omega, which is an awesome name, has a lot of verticality to it, and it also holds one of the demon keys and the Unmakyr weapon. So this weapon is basically a laser gun, and I think it's an excellent addition. The Unmakyr can be powered up by obtaining each of the 3 demon keys scattered across the 3 secret levels in the game. The demon keys have a secondary function that's only noticeable when you reach the final boss, and I think it's an incredible touch. There have been useful items before in classic Doom, but this game rewards the player for exploring each of the secret levels and adds a practical reason for reaching them, as well as grabbing the demon keys. This gives Doom 64 more replay value as a result, and I like the idea of finding these 3 artifacts that actually give you a practical benefit during the final boss encounter. Exploring in classic Doom will reward you with weapons, ammo, and armor, but the world doesn't react differently, unlike how the demon keys work. The Unmakyr and the demon keys aside, Outpost Omega is just a short fun challenge map with some great height to it. The following few normal maps in Doom 64 are all set in the UAC facility, and they are probably the low point in the game. They're fine, but they tend to feel a bit generic after a while. However, after map 8, Doom 64 takes place entirely in Hell. That is such a nice break from classic Doom on PC, and this sets Doom 64 apart from the rest. The first Hell level in the game is a Dead Simple clone, which is always a perfect place to start. After clearing out all of the Mancubi and Pain Elementals, both of which have excellent redesigns, we move on to map 10, The Bleeding. This level is simply designed, with only a couple of castle buildings and an underground water tunnel system, and it just works. Hell so far in Doom 64 isn't all fire and brimstone, but instead these early levels are gothic and Tim Burton-esque. It all reminds me of a Hammer film in that regard. Map 11 is more about exploring and key collecting than actual combat encounters, but there are moments where things get tricky. Case in point, the part where you need to open the red door and there's a group of barons and hell knights on the other side ready to blast you at point blank range. I love the aesthetic of these castle levels, and map 12, Altar of Pain, also known as my all-time favourite map in the game, blends the more traditional look of Doom's Hell and the gothic citadels together. This map has the candles on the grounds lighting your way, the sea of blood, the more blatant demonic imagery, along with the medieval buildings, and it's fantastic. Doom has almost never looked so visceral before. Doom 64 really shines when we get into these hell stages, and the map designs, like the layouts of the enemies, keys and everything, are also well done. The updated lighting for this game feels like it's shown off more in these levels, and I love how colourful Doom 64 can be, even with the ambient music and the moody atmosphere it's trying to pull off. Not counting Hectic, map 12 contains the exit to the second secret level of the game, called The Lair. This one is pretty good and to the point. I like the little puzzle the player needs to do in order to grab the second demon key, with how you have to shoot a group of well-hidden switches in the time limits. Good stuff. Map 13, Dark Citadel, reminds me of a freakier version of Abattoir from Plutonia, with all of the meat hooks and wooden pillars about the place. This level is a little too barren for my tastes. There's a few too many lackluster rooms, but it's not a terrible map. Map 14, Eye of the Storm, is another solid castle level, and yeah, you'll see a few more of these maps over the game's campaign. I find the Dark Fortress surrounded by water design interesting, and it's typically what I think of when I hear Doom 64, but there might be a bit too many of these levels. Still, Eye of the Storm is pretty damn good, and the following level, Map 15, Dark Entries, has some pretty decent set pieces and puzzle elements. The section with the Arachnotron that shoot 2 rows of projectiles simultaneously rather than just one, by the way, while you're trying to do a key puzzle is frustrating in a good way, and I also like the fireballs shooting from these stone-faced tablets in this dark open room. It's a pretty difficult level, probably one of the hardest yet in Doom 64, and most of that falls on the Arachnotrons. Map 16, Blood Keep, is up next, and I can do without this level. I mean, it's fine, and I like the Nosferatu coffin wall textures and the fluorescent blue cave, but it is one of the more forgettable levels. Map 17, Watch Your Step. This is a straightforward level, with waves of enemies spawning in until you eventually face off against the Cyber Demon. They give you plenty of ammo to take him down within this level alone, so if you're playing from a pistol start, you should still have no trouble with it. Map 17 is pure fun. It feels like an expanded version of Dead Simple, and has some simple yet effective texture work. The final stretch of Doom 64 might be the best section in the game, where it throws everything at you. Unlike, let's say, all of the classic Doom games, Doom 64 ends on a pretty strong note. Map 18, Spawned Fear, is another great looking hell level and has a bit of everything. Buildings ripped straight from a Hammer film, this green waste room that actually foreshadows the later parts of the level where you need to use the hazmat suit. There is a circular shaped room that screams occult and houses a group of pain elementals, and there's a little courtyard area outside of where the main buildings are. Map 18 also contains an exit to the final secret level of the game, and it's fairly easy to get to. All you do is go through the yellow key door, trigger a teleporter in the parallel room, and that's it. In the Void is the name of the third secret map, and it tries to be more abstract than the previous ones. Instead of hitting a switch or going through an exit teleporter, the player needs to jump off the Void to end the level, which is actually kinda cool. This might be one of the most interesting interesting Doom 64 maps, since it attempts something completely new with its design, and we haven't really seen it before in Doom yet. Map 19, The Spiral, is extremely short, but it's another well done level. It honestly feels like this map was designed by Sandy Peterson and should be placed in Doom 2, as it's a fairly simple gimmick with the player going up a huge spiral staircase with enemies shooting them at all angles. It's fairly easy once you get the hang of it, and Map 19 is a perfect palette cleanser from the more exploratory maps. It's excellent. Map 20, Breakdown, starts out with an assault of hit scanners and imps, firing from the ground and up top respectively. The design of this beginning room reminds me of Pharaoh from TNT Evolution, and I really like it. You shoot the switch from up here to lower the blue key, similar to Valere. Nevertheless, Breakdown is a very good map and has some amazing looking rooms. The same goes for Map 21, Pitfalls, which is rather tricky to maneuver through at first due to the platforming in this rocky area, but this is a wonderful level. Map 21 feels expansive without feeling overly convoluted, and it's my second favourite map in the game. This is without a doubt one of the highlights of Doom 64, along with each of the following maps until the very end. Map 22, Burnt Offerings, Map 23, Unholy Temple, and Map 24, No Escape are all solid in their own rights. Even though Map 12, Altar of Pain, is hands down the best map in Doom 64 and my personal favourites, I'd say that the game's ending third is the most well designed and memorable. Map 22, Burnt Offerings, is connected by this courtyard arena, and this map is rather heavy on the Arachnotrons, which I don't mind. This is the endgame after all, so I expect it to throw the more difficult enemies at me. Map 23, Unholy Temple, is one of the most intricate levels, with some of the most elaborate environmental elements. You have to collect the yellow, blue, and red keys like normal, but you also have to figure out this unique key switch puzzle to unlock the path to get out of there. This level has some dickish traps, like the two crushing slabs in the blue key door. Oh, and there's also the section where if you get the switch code wrong, a Hell Knight will spawn out of nowhere. Overall, Map 23 is an excellent stage, and it's one of the best looking maps that Doom 64 has to offer. As for Map 24, No Escape, it's good, but there's not too much to comment on as it's merely a Cyber Demon boss fight before the endgame. I kinda wish that Unholy Temple was the penultimate map of the game, since it acts like the perfect penultimate challenge right before the end boss encounter. The final map of Doom 64 is either piss easy or fairly difficult depending on whether you grabbed the demon keys. Besides upgrading the Unmakyr, you can additionally use the demon keys to activate these switches in the final map to lock the demons from spawning in. This makes it so much easier to kill the Mother Demon, a new boss monster designed specifically for Doom 64. Go ahead and just kill it with a few blasts of a BFG or Unmakyr and you've completed the game. If you finished the super secret level, Hectic, which I would only recommend after you've beaten the game already, you can unlock the bonus fun levels from the menu screen, along with being able to select any other stage you want. The fun maps in Doom 64 are just small challenges that can all be completed in like 20 minutes. They're fine, there's nothing wrong with them, but at the same time, there's nothing important to note. Doom 64 is considered the forgotten game in the Doom series, mostly due to how everyone thought that it was only a Doom port for the Nintendo 64. Besides that misinformation, people have had a mixed reaction to it due to the gloomy tone it sets, along with the hazardous environmental scripting. The more and more I play Doom 64, the more I love it, and when all of its pieces fall into place, the gothic architecture, the eerie music, the more menacing enemy designs, the game becomes truly special. Yes, there's a couple of criticisms you can throw at the game, like the increased amount of backtracking per level, or how a couple of maps can feel samey, but for the most part, Doom 64 is one of the better games in the series. The dark, cultish atmosphere is so effective, partly due to most of their campaign being set in hell, and also the overall level design and gameplay feels polished too. Over the years, Doom 64 has gotten reassessed and found a new audience, with id Software embracing the game in newer Doom material, and with them remastering it for current consoles and PC. I'm glad that we have had a resurgence of this game, since it does a lot right, and like I said early on in the video, it's a solid balance between the fast-paced action from classic Doom and the type of mood that's set in Doom 3. I hope that it continues to reference Doom 64 in their new Doom titles, and I want them to even take Plutonia and TNT into account, like maybe throw in some final Doom Easter eggs or something in the Fortress of Doom. Doom 64 is not any better or worse in my opinion than any other classic Doom game, and it stands on the shoulders of giants, even to this day. The game is no doubt a different spin or take on the classic Doom series, but it's still Doom at the end of the day. Speaking about the new 2020 re-release, there was a new episode released with it, titled The Lost Levels. Now, I have no idea why this newly designed expansion pack created by Kaiser from Nightdive is dubbed the Lost Levels, since there's nothing lost about them. From my understanding, each of the maps were designed for the re-release, so that doesn't make any sense. Why not call it Doom 64 The Slayer Levels or something like that? This map pack is supposed to bridge the gap between Doom 64 and Doom 2016 after all, which it only does using a loose connection within the end text scroll, but the name would be at least more fitting than The Lost Levels. Being a pedantic fuck about expansion pack titles aside, Doom 64 The Lost Levels is a very consistent map set. Although there are only 6 levels in the campaign on top of one new fun map, each of them are quite dense and will take you a bit to finish them. The expansion starts out with Plant Ops, which is your fairly run-of-the-mill UAC base map. It's a good way to kick things off and features toxic waste pools, which is something you wouldn't find too often in regular Doom 64. Evil Sacrifice is next, and it's a standard Intro to Hell level. While it is a solid level, it is probably the weakest regular map of the set. Cold Grounds and Wretched Vats of the following levels, and these are my two favourites in the Lost Levels. I can't get enough of the water-covered fortress from Cold Grounds, and Wretched Vats is essentially set in a hellish prison, complete with hit scanners in cages. Thy Glory is the penultimate map in the Lost Levels, and it certainly acts like it. Backtracking is constant in this one, and it feels like a quest trying to find just one key. It's pretty good though, and the map's design reminds me a ton of Neurosphere from Plutonia for some reason. So, I said that Evil Sacrifice is probably the weakest regular level in the expansion, and that's because the boss map, Final Judgment, is the worst overall in the set. It's just a standard boss fight, but the annoying part is that you have to pick up each demon key one by one to spawn in the Sister Resurrector, as they're calling it, even though the boss is basically the Mother Demon 2.0, and by collecting all of the demon keys, the Unmakyr is fully powered up, so go ahead and use that to destroy it. Nevertheless, The Lost Levels is a great little expansion for Doom 64, and it's so refreshing to see this game get some support. It's crazy to think about the journey that Doom 64 went on, with it being initially discarded as a port. Then it was given a closer look by fans and has grown a strong cult following, to finally the game being officially re-released and it given the proper attention it deserves by id Software themselves. I have to credit Hugo Martin and Marty Stratton for making that happen, with Hugo explicitly saying that it's probably his favourite Doom game. Doom 64 covered a ton of ground, even back in 1997. Besides PlayStation Doom, this was the franchise's first proper taste into the more eerie and gothic sides of Doom, and I hold it in high regard as one of the most unique entries in the series. And this has been the lasting impact of Doom 64.